China. So, The Price of Friendship by Ellen Borg. So this title essentially just foreshadows how there will be a cost when the UK and China try to build relationships or ties with one another. So China and UK hope to strengthen their ties with one another, but this is at a cost, and this will result in UK endangering its relationships with the Tibet, Hong Kong, and the US. So just last year in Hong Kong, there was a huge rise in a large democratic movement. And when the UK arrived, they, however, did not help the Hong Kong people of any sort, because the UK were hoping to build more trading or strengthen its trading ties with China. And so it just continues to talk about how the UK is endangering those ties by trying for the UK to be best buddies with China. UN globalization threatens supreme petrodollar by Tim Maverick. So this article basically reflects on how it reflects over the effects of what would happen or what will happen when China devalued its yuan earlier this year. So China is trying to compete with the US's petrodollar, or the world's petrodollar, which is the US dollar bill. And the way the petrodollar was set up was that it had its own security, so that it became the must-have reserve currency of the world. But when China devalued its money, it's trying to make it the next world reserve currency. So by making it more cheaper, or just exchange more for your buck, they hope that it would make the yuan more viable in the world market overall. Nigeria. So the one that talks about Boko Haram, so it mainly talks about how the regime Boko Haram is threatening Nigeria's own sovereignty. So in the first half of the article, it just begins talking about the bombings, suicide bombs in northeast Nigeria, with many people killed, and locals saying that there have been even more that have not been reported. So many of the citizens are worried, and this has led to a huge fear of Boko Haram, and the people hope that the government can solve it. However, the government stated, quoted from the article, that Boko Haram has the ability to attack, seize, ravage, and hold up any Nigerian territory, and they can completely obliterate it. And so this article basically challenges Nigeria's own sovereignty and legitimacy. Nigeria. So the article talking about Boko Haram is talking about how there's this regime, or just these militants of Boko Haram, that are challenging Nigeria's own sovereignty. So the article for the first half talks about this recent suicide bombing, just home-based terrorist attacks in Nigeria, and more specifically northeast Nigeria, I guess. So this has led to a rising fear in the people, and they hope that the government can quench these militants. However, at the very end of the article, they do state that they can, quoted from the article, that Boko Haram has the ability to attack, seize, hold on to any Nigerian territory, and they can obliterate anything they wanted to. The second article, the NNPC's integrity one, so it just explains how and why the National Nigerian Petroleum Corporation must become more transparent because of the recent incidents. The director stated that they had to stress the importance of transparency, and they wanted Nigerians to have more trust in the corporation itself. So they would say that throughout the article, how they would make commercially publicize all their monthly activities on their official website so that any Nigerian citizen could access it. Great Britain. So the article talked about the new Labour with Jeremy Corbyn. It talks about how his new Labour Party would look like. But in the first half of the article, it just talks about the reasons as to why the Labour Party just lost in general. So there was 3 reasons. The SNP, or Scottish National Party, took most of Scotland, and that just took out the Labour Party in Scotland. Now, there's a huge rise in people voting for UKIP, and there's also more people, around 1 million people, that voted for the Green Party in 2015's election. So in the article, in the second half of the article, it just begins to talk about how Corbyn just is a representative of the progressive working class people who have salaries and the multi-ethnic poor in general. And it begins to stay at the very end of the article, quoted just in case, that Corbynism is a form of anti-politics in general. The second Great Britain article just talks about Britain on being in or out of the EU. So just like recent polls showed that many British citizens would like to get Britain out of the EU. So the article just goes on the out campaign and the in campaign for the EU. And so the out campaign is just basically trying to gain more support from the people. So they're trying to get like a public relations boost to gain support for their out campaign. The rest of the article does talk about the in campaign, but also states many problems they have. And one of the major problems the in campaign does have is that they're not getting that much money, since most of their money is coming from multinational corporations, and that's not really helping them. Iran. So the first article about environmentalism. So the article begins talking about how people are just trying to promote more environmentalism in Iran. How there's a new age, well, the younger generation, and I guess the more affluent ones too, are the ones that are pushing for this movement. And, well, that's fine and dandy, but for the most article, it also outlines how this is just a representation of the people's contempt with the status quo, and how they seek more social changes. And this basically just shows a phase in their democratization process in Iran. The second article is the international nuclear agreement between Iran and a UN agency. I think it was called the International Atomic Energy Agency. Yeah. And well, this nuclear agency is actually trying to push more strict regulations on their biannual inspections. However, Iran has objected to that and has said that the agency violates their own sovereignty, Iran's sovereignty. So the US and the EU are trying to throughout the whole article is talking about ways to make a trade between the two. And they don't know how to decide it overall, but they said the issues will be sorted out over time, and that any problems will be sent to the Joint Commission in Mexico. So the article that talks about the multinational corporations, it's talking about how these new emerging MNCs are becoming huge innovators in the market, the world market, I guess. So companies from these developing countries like China and Mexico are becoming the leaders in the market. The article goes for examples. They highlight this one big Mexican company too. So I guess quoted from the article, this bakery company called Bimbo, a Mexican brand, has just recently bought Sara Lee in 2010, and just it continues talking about how these MNCs are just rising and becoming these innovators, and overall it just reflects on just the power and influence of these MNCs over these nations, basically. And the second one that's talking about the empty chairs in Latin America. So it's talking about the current democratization and legitimacy of these Latin American countries, like Mexico. So it talks about a really good portion of the article talks about how these are unfairly arranged, these elections. However, these elections do give the average citizen much information on their own democratic government. So news coverage of these presidential debates really do influence the politics behind them, because most average citizens don't know what's up, so they only know from what they see. And so it just really enforces the polarity of their government, I guess. So Russia. So the article talking about the anti-globalization movement. So it begins reflecting over that movement, I guess. So the Russian anti-globalization movement openly condemned condemned the violence of Moroccan forces in this against Saharan citizens in the West Saharan territories. Well, that's the first part of the article, basically. And the second part is essentially talking about this interview between the president of the anti-globalization movement and this politician of the West Saharan people, and how it reflects on how over this ongoing struggle between the two groups. Second article talking about Putin and a containment policy. So it just reflects on how it won't be effective against Russia in general. So it's talking about how Russia has the reason why containment won't work is that it has like a very deep entrenched influence in these the West in general. So in the article it talks about this main conflict between the West and Moscow. It's talking about the transparency of the West versus the corruption and sphere of influence of Russia. And so it just talks about how Russia can abuse the Western's own transparency, and that overall just take advantage of it.